Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience. I'm here tonight to compare two different versions of the same headphone amp, an older version and a newer version. About sometime last summer, I did a review of the Wavebourn Edelweiss-3 Pre-Amp Plus, and this was an OTL type tube combination headphone amp and preamp, and it was actually a pre-production prototype model that was not being marketed yet. Well, this headphone amp combination preamp is still in the prototype phase of development, and Wavebourn has just come out with a newer version, maybe the latest or last version before this actually goes into production. But I was lucky enough to get a sample of this, and I still have the older version from last year, and I had the opportunity to compare the two and decide which I thought was better, the newer version or the older version. And there's not a lot of differences, but the main difference is a boost in the output current, enabling this amp to supply a higher amount of current and be better for harder to drive headphones, especially planar headphones. And normally an OTL type headphone amp is usually ideal for high impedance headphones and sometimes works well with low impedance headphones as long as they're efficient, mostly dynamic driver type headphones. And this amp was originally designed for just that, high impedance headphones and efficient dynamic type driver headphones, and not really for planar headphones. But what I found out with the last year's version of this is it actually worked very well with efficient planar headphones, such as the Kennerton line of planar headphones. They actually sound really good with this, even though it's an OTL type amp. But if I tried to drive harder to drive planar headphones, such as the Hi-Fi Man Sandara or some of the harder Hi-Fi Man headphones, it fell short. It couldn't produce enough current to make those headphones sound good the way they should, because low impedance planar headphones usually require a lot of current to produce good bass, and without enough the bass can sound flat, lacking dynamics, and it can distort very easily. So anyway, I spoke to Anatoly Lisowski from Wavebourn, and what he did with this amp compared to the one from last year is he set the current limits at double what they used to be, but the problem with that is it produced a lot more heat. So he replaced the end plates on the amp they used to be wood, and replaced them with solid blocks of aluminum that act as heat sinks. So let me give you a quick look at this amp, and this is the newer version. And it looks very similar to the older version, except for instead of wood on the end plates, it uses the aluminum, and these are solid blocks of aluminum. This amp is kind of heavy, so I'm not going to hold it up too long. So I will show you, give you another look at this in a minute, but I wanted to talk about it for a couple minutes first. First of all, this was loaned to me by Anatoly Lisowski from Wavebourn. And this is a pre-production prototype model, and a definite price has not been set yet. They are handmade in the USA. I believe he's from Austin, Texas. Austin or Houston, I think it's Austin, Texas. And this is a combination headphone amp and preamp, and it is an OTL type tube amp, which means output transformer-less, which means it does not use transformers in the output stage, and that usually means, like I said earlier, that this would work well with high impedance headphones and efficient dynamic type headphones, but we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. This amp has 4 sets of RCA single-ended inputs on the rear, and it has 2 sets of RCA single-ended output, preamp outputs on the rear of the unit, and then it has 2 6.3 millimeter headphone outputs. These are single-ended also. This is a single-ended amp, and I've given my opinions about that before. I think I really don't see an advantage to balanced amps. I think that single-ended amps can be every bit as good, but I'm not going to get into that whole discussion right now. So anyway, this unit is 12.75 inches wide by 8.25 inches deep front to back and 5.5 inches tall. The older unit weighed in at about 7.5 pounds. This one is a little bit heavier, but I didn't actually measure it. It's heavier because of the solid aluminum end plates on it that do add a little bit of weight. So what's new? Like I said, the big difference in this is the current limits on it have been doubled, so it can put out pretty much double the power of the old unit. The current isn't limited to as low level as the other one was, and like I said, these aluminum plates on the end are used to dissipate that extra heat caused by the extra current. So let me give you a closer look at the unit here. And this is kind of heavy, so I'm not going to take too long doing this. Starting out on the front, you have your power button, which does have an LED light around it that goes on when you power up the unit. And then you've got it's a balance control, and that's really nice because it's not like the balance control you'd find on a stereo component. This is just, it's only plus or minus 2 decibels, which means basically all it adjusts, and you barely perceive the difference in the balance. What it does is it just kind of moves the center of soundstage. So if there's a problem, say your headphones have a slight imbalance between the drivers, which is kind of rare, but in my case, my ears are actually slightly off balance. I hear a little bit better with my right ear than my left ear, so I can kick it over just a little bit. If I kick it over to about 10 o'clock, which is maybe about a 1 decibel difference, it moves the sound stage where instead of the sound stage being to the right side of my nose, the center, it moves it right where it should be. So it just, you know, with most amps, I do have that problem where the sound stage is just slightly off center to the right because of my hearing, not because of the headphone or the amp. So this is really nice. Like I said, all the way left to right is only plus or minus 2 decibels. So it's a very small adjustment. And the only other amp I've seen this feature on was the SPL Phonitor XE, and I really like that, you know, being able to make that small balance adjustment. Anyway, you also, on the front here, you have your 4-way input control to go through your 4 sets of inputs, and then you've got your volume knob. On top, you can see you've got your 3 tubes. You've got your transformer and your input tube behind the transformer, and then your 2 output tubes in back here, and then you've got 2 6.3 millimeter headphone jacks on the top of the unit. And let me try to show you the back here. Like I said, this is a little bit hard to hold with one hand. You've got, starting at this end, you've got your 4 sets of RCA inputs, and as you can see, this uses really high quality RCA jacks. I hate it when, I mean, it's understandable on low price equipment, but when expensive, higher end equipment uses those little press-on, you know, RCA connections that if you got a tight-fitting cable, they pull off with the cable, then you have to pull them out of the end of the cable and try to get them back in and all that. I hate that, but these are really high-quality RCA connections. Then you've got your 2 sets of RCA preamp outputs, and then you actually have a gain control here on the back that controls the level of your outputs, of your preamp outputs here. Doesn't affect the headphone amp, but it does change the output so you can match it up well to your amp, whatever you're running into. And then you've got your AC input here and a ground connection if you need it. And then, like I said, you can see on the ends, you've got the aluminum ends instead of the wood on the former model. So I'm going to set this down. It's getting kind of heavy. So first, what I want to talk about is what was good about the old unit and what its weak points were. So the old unit, it was really good at high impedance headphones, such as right now I have the ZMF Atrium in, which is a 300 ohm headphone, and it sounds outstanding on this amp, probably better than any other amp I've tried it on. So being an OTL, that's what they're good at. This amp is exceptional, works really, really well with the high impedance ZMF. It also works really well with low impedance dynamic driver headphones. An example I can give you is the LSA HP2. That is a pretty efficient dynamic driver headphone, but it's only, I think, 32 ohms, and that headphone sounds really good on this amp. When I use this with lower impedance dynamic drivers, it usually adds a little bit of warmth and a little bit more weight to the bass and makes them sound outstanding, in my opinion. I think that headphone sounds probably better on this amp than I've heard it on any other amp. It also sounds really good on the Felix Audio Echo, but I think it sounds even better on this one. And then the other place that this works real well, and when I first received it, I was told this probably would probably not match up well with planar magnetic driver headphones. But I found out through experimenting that the easier to drive planar magnetics, and that would be like the Kennerton planar headphones, like the newer Ragnar planar, which I have, which is an outstanding headphone. It sounds excellent on this amp. The older Kennerton Thror, the Kennerton Woden, all of those, they're planar magnetics, but they sound really good on this amp because they're efficient and they don't need a huge amount of current. So as long as, if you're listening to them at a normal listening level or even up into a medium loud level, they sound really good. If you try to push them up real loud, the bass starts to get a little fuzzy, a little muddy, and that's where this current limit on the original, or the model from last year, kicks in and limits the current. So if I'm listening to those at comfortable listening level or even a little above that, the older version works fine. But if I try to push them up into low volume or loud volume, they can get, like I said, the bass can get a little bit muddy. So then what the older model from last year didn't do well was drive the medium to harder driver planar magnetic headphones. And a medium hard to drive planar headphone, and a good example would be like the Hi-Fi Man Sandara, the Hi-Fi Man Edition XS. Those are what I would consider to be medium hard to drive. And with those, if I listen to them at normal listening levels with the original version from last year, they actually sound pretty good. But if I try to push the volume at all, even up into medium loud, they start losing, the bass starts losing dynamics, the bass started sounding a little muddy and lost its punch and lost its weight. So, and if I tried to push them up into loud volumes, it didn't sound good at all. And then hard to drive planar magnetic headphones like the Hi-Fi Man HE560 and the new HE400 SE, which takes a lot of power to drive. Both of those, even at normal listening levels, they didn't really sound good. The bass just sounded weak and kind of thin and lacked weight, and if I tried to push them at all, it just didn't sound good. So that was the weakness of the last year's version of this headphone amp. So what Anatoly tried to do is, by boosting or setting the current limits at double what they used to be, his hope was that this would do a better job of driving the harder to drive planar magnetic headphones. So he sent it to me because I had a lot of headphones around that I could try, and I had the older version still, so I got to compare the two directly side by side and see if there was an improvement. So what I came up with through a lot of testing with a lot of different headphones, and some headphones it didn't make a difference. Other headphones it made quite a bit of a difference going to the newer models. So I'll start with the headphones that didn't really make a difference. High impedance headphones like the 300 ohm ZMF Atrium, it didn't really make a difference going from the last year's model to the new model from this year. And by the way, the picture behind me is the new model, this year's model. Okay, easy to drive planar magnetic headphones such as the Kennertons, and also I wanted to mention the version 3 of the Hi-Fi Man Aria, the stealth version, which is a lot easier to drive than the older versions 1 or 2. It actually works out real well with this amp too, and actually sounds good. Both the older version and the newer version. But the older version, if you try to push it too much and try to get it too loud, then it starts losing quality in the bass. So the easy to drive planars such as the Kennertons or the Hi-Fi Man Aria Stealth, they sound really good on the older version at normal volume, but if you try to push them too loud, they start losing quality. On the newer version, I can push them up to medium loud, even loud, and they don't lose any quality in the bass. They still have a lot of weight to the bass. It's clean, it's undistorted, and there is an improvement if you want to listen to these headphones at louder than normal listening levels. The new version of this amp does do a better job at louder levels. And then going to the medium, hard to drive planars like say the Sundara and the Edition XS. Before, with the older version, if I just listened to them at a comfortable level, they did pretty well, but if I tried to push the volume at all, they started losing quality to the bass. Where with the newer version, I can push those a lot harder. I can push them up into medium, even loud volumes, and they still sounds good. That extra current does help a lot. So this now, I would say, works real well with the medium, hard to drive planar magnetic headphones such as the Sundara and Edition XS. And then I tried it with a couple of the harder to drive. That would be the Hi-Fi Man HE400 SE and the Hi-Fi Man HE560. And normally the HE560 is the hardest to drive headphone I have. And with the last year's version, it didn't sound too bad at normal listening levels, but if I tried to push the volume up at all, the bass got soft and lacking impact. Where this model, it does much better. I can push it up into loud volumes and it still sounds good, still has pretty good slam to the bass, pretty good dynamics. It's not as good as some of the more powerful amps, you know, like say my Audio GD Master 9 that puts out 9 watts per channel. It's not quite on that level, but it does a respectable job. So now even with the harder to drive planar magnetic headphones, this amp it's adequate. It does a pretty good job. The Wavebourn does make the Edelweiss Preamp Plus, which has 3 watts per channel of output. And I'll be doing a comparison of that new one to the older version, the same as I'm doing this comparison tonight. I'll be doing that soon in the next couple of weeks, because that that is a transformer coupled output amp, and it is more suitable for the hard to drive headphones. But anyway, so the older version of this wasn't a very good matchup with harder to drive headphones like the HE560. This one does a lot better job. It's not ideal, but it does a lot better. And then also the HE400 SE, which I just did a review on like a month ago, that headphone actually is an excellent indicator of an amp's power, because that headphone, when underpowered, the bass basically turns to crap. The bass just almost disappears if it's underpowered, and the bass gets muddy, it gets distorted, it has no weight, no impact. But as soon as you provide enough power, the bass becomes, much, much better. It's just a lot more solid, a lot more weight. So anyway, the original version of this from last year didn't do very well with that headphone. The bass just, even at normal listening levels, the bass was definitely lacking. Where on this version, the new one, at normal listening levels, the bass sounds really good. It sounds the way it should, and even up to medium loud, it still sounds good. If I push it too far, it starts to, the quality of the bass starts to go down a little bit. So once again, I would say this amp is, it's a good match with a hard to drive planar magnetic headphone, but not ideal. But it is usable with that type of headphone. So my opinion is, I do think that this is a worthwhile improvement. The extra current does make this amp usable with a wider range of headphones. It was excellent before for high impedance headphones, and it was excellent for efficient dynamic headphones, and it was excellent with efficient planar magnetics, but it wasn't an ideal setup. It didn't work out well with hard to drive planar headphones, where this one is maybe not the ideal setup for hard to drive planars, but it's at least adequate. It does a pretty good job, and it is usable unless you try to push the volume too hard. If you're listening at comfortable levels or even medium loud, it does a good job. If you try to really push them, or if you try to EQ in some bass, it's not going to be as good as some of the more powerful amps like the Edelweiss Preamp Plus, which puts out 3 watts per channel and does a better job with that, or some of your solid state amps that put out a lot of power. So yes, I think this is an improvement over last year's model, and my advice to Wavebourn would be to go with this new model. I think more people would be happy because it fits a wider range of headphones. So yes, I highly recommend it. Last year's version, and for the right headphones, and this one I also highly recommend, and now it is a good match with a wider range of headphones. So really enjoyed my time with this amp, and I just wanted to say thank you to Anatoly from Wavebourn for giving me the opportunity to listen to and compare these two really nice amps. So yes, I recommend it, and like I said earlier, this is not only a headphone amp, but it's a preamp also, and I recommend it for that use too. I mean, it's, if you want to hook this up to even a solid state speaker amp, it's gonna, excuse me just a second. Even hooked up to a solid state speaker amp, it's gonna add some warmth and tube-like sound. And what I mean by that tube sound is not only a little warmer and a little more pleasant in my opinion, but it's more layered and more three-dimensional than most solid state amp. So by using this as a preamp going into your solid state amp, you can add a little bit of that tube sound to your speaker system, even though you're using a solid state amp. So I recommend it for both, for headphones and as a preamp into your solid state, or even, you know, a tube headphone or speaker amp. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this up now. Once again, this is William from the Headphone Experience. If this video has helped you, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And the Headphone Experience over at Facebook is up to almost 16,500 members. So you're all welcome over there. Hope to see you. Once again, thanks for watching my video.